Hello, I am Mr. Shrum, and I am back again with a biology tutorial walkthrough for this class. And today we're going to look at the carrying capacity of ecosystems. We're back on ecosystems. We will use mathematics to explain the factors that affect carrying capacity of ecosystems at different scales. So let's get into that. So in the warm-up, we're asked, carrying capacity relates to a population of organisms in an ecosystem. What do you think the term carrying capacity means? What factors could influence it? And our sample answer for that, a population is the number of organisms of a particular species that live in an area. The carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals of a particular species that a region can support. Carrying capacity would greatly depend on what resources are available for that particular species. And we'll learn more about that in the slides to come. We have another question. An invasive species is a non-native species that lives in a region. Human activity has accidentally or intentionally introduced many invasive species into ecosystems. Name 2 human activities that could contribute to the introduction of invasive species and explain your response. The sample answers: human travel can lead to an increased risk of invasive species, Native species, both animals and plants, can stow away on cars, trains, boats, airplanes, and bring them to another ecosystem. Another human activity, maybe climate change, can play a role. Human activity causes increased levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which in turn creates an increase in global temperatures. Because all species are adapted to a specific climate, climate changes can result in non-native species spreading into other ecosystems. Those are 2 answers that come to mind. Maybe you picked up on another answer. Okay, so we are on our first content topic, measuring populations. Now, when scientists use the term population, they are usually referring to the number of individuals of the same species that live in an area. Populations increase and decrease for several reasons, including gradual environmental changes, natural disasters, and human activity. Population size and distribution. So we look at the size of the population, but also how a population is spread out within an area. Like humans in the United States, there are a lot of people in certain areas, and then in other more rural areas, only a few people really live there per square mile. So it's not the same across every area. Biologists define population size as the number of individuals in a population. For example, biologists estimate that the population size of Florida panthers currently living in Florida is about 100 individuals. Now, population density is the average number of individuals per unit area. Consider that the population size of a population of beetles is 100 square meters. In 100 square meters is 1,000 beetles. The population density of the beetle is the population size divided by the population area. So we had 1,000 beetles divided by 100 square meters. And that leaves us with 10 beetles per square meter. Okay? Size is just the amount in an area. Density is the amount divided by the size of the area. Question, oh, well, answer key already pops up. But there are an estimated 12,600 spiders in a region of 525 square meters. So how many spiders are there per square meter? That is just dividing 12,600 by 525, which is 24. That means the population density of spiders, 24 spiders per square meter. Okay. Now we classify distribution into 3 types. This is the dispersion pattern. And the first, uniform distribution, that's when individuals are spread equally throughout the region. Individuals can live anywhere in their habitat and spread out to use the available resources. Clumped distribution, that means individuals form little clusters throughout the area. Few or no individuals are found between the clusters. So that means, in between these clusters, there's not really going to be individuals existing apart from those clusters. This is a very popular distribution in social organisms like primates or humans, and when resources are few and unevenly distributed in a region. So an example would be animals or humans that stay near a body of water, where a lot of cities form around rivers or lakes or oceans. Yeah. And lastly, we have random distribution. And that means it's mostly just chaos, and you can't really anticipate where certain individuals will live. They're capable of living anywhere, and so they can be found all over the place. And you see this with species like bears or leopards, animals that aren't social. They kind of do their own thing besides mating, but besides that, they just live alone as opposed to social organisms. All right. So, yeah, we have a sample answer. So given this map, this is the US population from 2000. Which population distribution pattern do US residents most closely resemble? Remember, uniform, is it the same across the area? Random, is it random? Or is it clustered? Do they form clumps of population distribution? To me, depending on the region you're looking at, it's clumped. So it's not random. You do see clumps of lots of population. And it's usually by water. usually, but you do have some more inland too. Humans are social animals who interact pretty regularly for the most part. The United States has higher populations near major cities, and cities generally have more resources than rural areas, generally. So more people are able to live in one spot in cities. Population growth and limits. Now, there are three factors that influence the growth or number of individuals in a population. They are birth rate, death rate, and migration. The birth rate is the number of individuals born in a population over a period of time. Death rate, that's the number of individuals that die in a population over a given period of time. Migration is the movement of individuals in and out of the population. Biologists use the term immigration to describe the movement of individuals out of the population, and immigration to describe individuals moving into the population. So immigration, immigration. In most species, migration has the least effect on population growth. Migration causes seasonal variation in numbers, but not necessarily permanent differences. Birth rate and death rate are more important in that regard. Limiting factors on population growth. Populations don't grow continuously. Factors that prevent populations from growing indefinitely are called limiting factors. Let's look at some biotic and abiotic limiting factors. Resource availability. The amount of resources available regulates a population's growth. Shelter and water are abiotic limiting factors, whereas food is biotic. Changes in the amount and quality of these resources affect growth in the population. Predators. The presence and number of predators in an area can be a limiting factor. An increase in the number of predators can decrease the population size. Reproduction. The frequency of reproductive cycles in a species' lifetime can become a limiting factor as well. Some organisms reproduce only once during their lifetimes. Others may reproduce multiple times. The number of offspring produced in a single reproductive event can also influence population growth. So you can see there are these interlocking factors that the population has to depend on. How many resources are available, whether predators are there or not, and how many babies they can have at one time, all affect population growth. Now, excuse me. All populations in an area have a minimum and a maximum limit. So there's usually a range of a population being able to live in a certain area. The minimal viable population is a measurement that biologists use to determine the minimum number of individuals a species needs to reproduce successfully and remain viable. It's the lowest number a population can have without facing extinction. Causes of population decreases include natural disasters, drops in genetic diversity, and reproductive variations such as low birth rates or an imbalance between male and female offspring. One example that comes to my mind is the panda population. Their birth rate is so low and they're not reproducing at a rate high enough for them to repopulate. They're kind of in the stagnant, stalling number right now. Biologists estimate the minimal viable population of a population for a particular time period. So they're estimating all the time. For example, the MVP could be an estimate of the smallest viable size of a population to ensure existence for 100 years. Maybe not necessarily forever, right? They use many factors to calculate the MVP, and that means looking at reproductive behaviors, birth and death rates, and reproductive needs or habits. Over here we have the North American bald eagle population. In the early 60s, that population dropped to about 1,000, but it has now rebounded to about 70,000. So for a minute there, it was a little sketchy for the bald eagles. Now, here we're looking at survivorship curves. These are graphs that show the survivability of a species. Survivability is an important factor in calculating a species' minimal viable population. Some species have high birth rates, but few of the young survive to adulthood. Others have lower birth rates, but higher survivability. Survivorship curves help scientists predict how an environmental change may affect a population. Click type 1, type 2, type 3 to learn more about the curves. So this type 1 right here, this indicates a low death rate and a high survival rate for most of an organism's lifetime. Most individuals reach adulthood, but the number of those who survive into old age then rapidly decline. So we have age on the bottom and survivors. So they reach adulthood, but then into old age, they don't really last much longer. Type 2 have a moderate death rate. Individuals die throughout the lifespan of the species. So type 1, they don't really die until old age, and then they rapidly decline. Type 2, people, they may die throughout their entire life. It's kind of sad. Type 3, this type of curve is found in species with a high death rate at an early age. Only a few individuals reach adulthood and live to old age. So I'd rather be type 1, to be honest. Carrying capacity. Over here we have a picture, a bunch of buffalo, bison. A habitat has enough food and other resources to support only a fixed number of individuals. And the carrying capacity is the maximum population size that a particular habitat can sustain indefinitely. Biologists use the letter K to symbolize carrying capacity. Environmental conditions and resources determine the habitat's carrying capacity. These resources may be access to food, water, or sunlight. the most limiting resource determines the carrying capacity. It's important to remember this carrying capacity is not fixed. A change in resource availability could actually change the carrying capacity. For example, deforestation shrinks the size of a forest. Fewer animals are able to live in that area, so the carrying capacity will shrink. The concept of carrying capacity helps explain why populations don't grow indefinitely, and they tend to stabilize over a period of time. Here are population growth models, and they vary. Population growth varies. Some may remain stable over time. Others could show really fast changes. And let's look at a couple examples. Exponential growth, if you look at this, a J-shaped curve, they call it. That's a population with a constant birth rate and without any limiting factor shows an exponential growth model. It grows slowly at first, but soon that growth rate increases rapidly. All populations show an exponential growth pattern until a limiting factor affects them. So they'll start out slow and then quickly hit their carrying capacity. Now, another example is this S-shaped curve, and that is logistic growth. Once a population experiences a limiting factor, its growth pattern changes. The graph of logistic growth looks the same as the exponential growth for a certain period of time. Like these look pretty similar, but then the growth slows as resources become scarce and population numbers reach the habitat's carrying capacity. The top of the graph begins to curve, forming an S shape. So here we have an activity that you can complete. I'll move on to the next option, the next topic, changes that affect population. Environmental changes may affect a population's ability to access resources. Sometimes these changes are beneficial for the species and actually increases populations. But at other times, they harm the species, causing its numbers to decline. And if that population continues to decline, the species can actually face extinction. In this picture, you see deforestation and habitat destruction, and that can cause a decline in population numbers, certainly. So here we can look at the effect of environmental changes, natural disasters. These are big geological or climatic events that devastate an area and cause a loss of life, like the California fires or the Australian fires that recently took place, or the hurricanes that came this year. We had a large number of hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, floods, heat waves. All of these can affect populations. Aside from death they can also have indirect effects like destroying sources of food, shelter. They may also limit access to resources. Human exploitation is another big one. People remove organisms from an area for food or to keep as pets or to use something the organism produces. Now, such extractions can deplete populations if done without limits. Another way humans affect populations is through altering the natural landscape for purposes of agriculture, logging, and construction. And this changes the way the ecosystem can function, and that may negatively affect some populations. Habitat loss. A habitat can decrease for several reasons. Natural disasters, human exploitation or alteration can make that habitat inhospitable and may make that habitat inaccessible to the species previously able to access it. When a habitat shrinks, there's a greater competition for available resources. The carrying capacity drops and the population decreases. So life just gets harder in these areas. Disease can also cause population numbers to drop drastically. However, if a species develops resistance to a particular disease, its population will increase. And climate change. Climate change is causing an increase in average global temperatures. Such changes affect a species' ability to survive in a particular area. For example, global warming is thinning the ice sheets in the Arctic, which has a negative effect on the lives of polar bears. Climate change is disrupting ecosystems. Some species may suffer while others might benefit as previously inhospitable areas now become suitable. Climate change results in a change in an area's species composition. As some species die or emigrate, which means they move out, while others immigrate into the area. As populations shift, the ecosystem balance is affected, and that further impacts the population as well. For example, new entrants, which means new people coming in, may compete with existing species for a resource, or one species may suffer as its symbiotic partner moves or dies off. I think I will leave that here and I will come back to finish this carrying capacity after my other class, okay? But I will be back. See you next time.